Explain like I'm 5. Why is Friday the 13th considered bad luck? I'm familiar with the movies, but when, where, how, why did Friday the 13th get its bad rap? Well, there was the summer camp, and when one of the kids died, his mom went nuts and started killing all the counselors. It happened on Friday the 13th. Knights Templar got double-crossed by big medieval Christian powers, even though they were purportedly God's fav group of dudes that run around killing people. And the big powers executed their leader on Friday the 13th. He cursed them. And because they were God's fav group of dudes that ran around killing people, he made the vibes on Friday the 13th bad. That's the legend as it was taught to me. On Friday the 13th of October in 1307, King Philip IV of France had every single Knights Templar arrested in a single coordinated event. It was a giant power and money grab. He had them all turned over to the Inquisition, which meant they were tortured for confessions and most were executed for heresy. So yeah, Friday the 13th has a history of bad. There is a long history across many cultures of 13 being a bad number. You have 12, a nice number that comes up all the time, is highly divisible, and just generally easy to work with. Then you add 1 and it messes everything up. All the nerds are salivating at this question, each with their own individual take on the subject, each repeating the same thing as the last drink up nerds. This your time. Another origin of the superstition is the betrayal of the Templars, which was initiated on Friday the 13th. It's been my understanding that Friday the 13th was the day Philip the Fair took down the order of the Knights Templar. It's a reference to the crucifixion of Jesus, which took place on a Friday. He was betrayed by one of the attendants of the Last Supper, famously being the 13th person at that table. It actually goes way back to the early 14th century 1300s in France. King Philip IV owed a lot of money to the Knights Templar, an extremely wealthy, secretive society of warrior priests who had discovered enormous amounts of treasure during one of the Crusades. He and the current Pope of the Catholic Church conspired to eliminate these guys, accusing them of heresy and Satanism that was considered worthy of being tortured and burned at the stake. Lovely. What day was picked to go after them? Friday the 13th. Literally my B-Day day for this year. I don't see how it's that unlucky since I had the best birthday of my life yesterday. It is the date in which the leading members of the Knight Templars were arrested in France. I thought it was the date the Vatican executed Order 66 against the Knights Templar. The Christian people said it was bad so others would be scared of witches. Friday the 13th is a day Wiccans pagans celebrate Freya, the goddess of fertility and war and love and death. Fun fact: 0 by 13h hexadecimal is 19 in decimal. Everything is 19. Ka is a wheel. Blaine is a pain. And that is the truth. Long days and pleasant nights. I read somewhere that prior to Catholicism, Friday the 13th was considered a day of love and affection. But the church didn't like the idea of sex before marriage. So to fight that, they announced it to be a day full of dread and misfortune instead. It's a Christian thing. The day of the week Jesus was crucified and the number of people around the table for the Last Supper. 13 is considered unlucky because there were 13 at dinner at the Last Supper and it didn't end too well for 2 of them, though one made a comeback a few days later. Friday connected to that. The crucifixion was on Good Friday. Some also believe, though how on earth they figured it out is anyone's guess, that Friday was the day on which Adam and Eve were evicted from the Garden of Eden after eating from the forbidden tree. Putting those together gives us Friday 13th as a bad day. Friday the 13th has been considered bad luck because it combines two unlucky elements, Friday and the number 13. Quite a long time ago, most tribes only knew numbers up to 10. So when the number 12 was discovered, it was considered lucky since it was divisible by 5 out of the first 6 digits, and people started avidly using 12 in a dozen, 12 inches in a foot, 12 pence in a shilling, etc. 13, on the other hand, was considered to be unlucky since it was only divisible only by itself and 1. No clue about TBE Friday stuff though. In Judeo-Christian circles, the angel of death passed over Egypt on Friday the 13th during the last plague. Because that's when Jason Voorhees killed all those camp counselors. Remember Camp Crystal Lake? Christian propaganda to steer Norse people away from feminine ideals. Friday being Freya's day, and 13 being the amount of periods in a year women in a coven. Or so I've been told. I saw in a science show that it has different reasons. 13 is the number for bad luck. The 13th falls on a Friday more often than any other day. So most stuff happens there. This Friday the 13th is complicated because it's the best day of the year. Treat yourself 2023. Fun fact: in the Gregorian calendar that we use, it repeats every 400 years. And in those 400 years, more 13ths fall on Friday than any other day of the week. So it's not unlucky. It's actually most likely the 13th will be a Friday. Houses built in the UK since WW2 don't have the house number 13. Same with apartment blocks. No 13th floor. We go from 12th floor to 14th floor. Is it a UK only thing? I was told that this had its origins in the Templar Knights' mass execution. They were executed on Friday, October 13th back in the 1300s. No one has mentioned it yet, but there are theories that Alexander the Great died on a Friday the 13th. What if they got it wrong and Friday the 14th was the unlucky day? People are always so certain of this uncertainty. It's comical how they set themselves up. In Spain, don't know if in other Latin countries it's the same. It's Martes y 13, Tuesday 13th, to be the bad luck day. So I guess it all evolves around the 13 number and not much the weekday. Friday is the 13th weekday, as in, starting to count days from Sunday. You land on Friday when you get to 13. So Friday the 13th combines two 13s. So it's extra unlucky. 13 is a woman number. That's why it's considered bad luck. The moon cycles every 28 days. And so do women. Another reason for the early church to disparage women. I've heard recently that it was because on Friday, 13th in 14th century French king ordered to capture all Templars, who were later tortured and executed. Because around 2000 years ago, some dude was maybe or maybe not born. And that started this whole thing with conflicts and prejudice. 13 was the basis of the pagan calendar, with 13 moons per year, 28-day cycles, etc., etc. 28 by 13,364. But the people who followed the guy that was maybe or maybe not born decided that paganism was bad and evil, and 13 became wrong. 13 was considered unlucky even during ancient Mesopotamia, as it was not included in Hammurabi's code.